Good morning, everyone. My name is David Lepofsky. I am Chair of the Ontarians with Disabilities Act Committee. With me is Patty Bregman with ARCH. She's counsel to the Ontarians with Disabilities Act Committee. The Ontarians with Disabilities Act Committee is a nonprofit, non-partisan, voluntary coalition of individuals and organizations across Ontario, both people with disabilities and people without disabilities, who've come together to achieve a barrier-free Ontario for people with disabilities. We include well over 80 major community organizations, some of whom have representatives here, just to mention a couple. The Canadian Hearing Society, the March of Dimes, the Bloor View Macmillan Centre, the Ontario Association for Community Living, just to mention some who are here, and just to mention a very small list of the many organizations who belong to us, but also many, many individuals across Ontario. We are organized now 4.5 years after we were born in 17 regions across Ontario and are growing fast. We have united for one single purpose. We want all Ontarians, people who have a disability today, that's 1.5 million Ontarians, and people who will have a disability sometime in the future, and that's, frankly, virtually everybody, to be able to live in a province that is free of barriers. And we need a new, strong, and effective law to achieve that. The law we seek is called the Ontarians with Disabilities Act. We are nonpartisan. We neither endorse nor are connected to any particular political party. Imagine wanting to vote in an election, but not being able to read the literature that candidates provide to you on what they stand for. Imagine wanting to go to an all-candidates debate just to hear what the candidates, the politicians, stand for, but not being able to get in because the all-candidates debate is being held in a building that is only accessed through a flight of stairs. Or imagine being at that all-candidates debate and finding out there's no bathroom that's accessible to use. Imagine watching a government-sponsored ad conveniently timed to take place just before an election about the government's record. But imagine there was no closed captioning, as we've received complaints has occurred. You're deaf. You don't know what the ad's about. You don't know what your tax dollars are being spent on. Imagine wanting to vote, but having trouble finding out whether you're on the voters list, or being asked to produce a driver's license, but you're blind. Imagine wanting to vote in an advance poll, but there's only a limited number of them, only a few days, in a short election, at least a short formal campaign, probably the longest election around, but the shortest campaign. And having trouble finding out either where you can vote or when you can vote because the returning officers aren't formally appointed and announced, as far as we've heard, until the day the campaign begins. Imagine that no one's going door to door to enumerate you, and you're concerned that there may not be any accessible information in a format you can read or on a medium you can read to find out even if you're on the voters list. Finally, imagine that you go to a voting station on Voters' Day, on Election Day, and even though it's supposed to be accessible, it isn't fully accessible. Perhaps the lighting isn't good enough for someone with low vision. Perhaps there's no accessible parking nearby, and you've got to walk further than you're physically able or travel further than you're physically able. Imagine that you're presented with a ballot that's supposed to be adapted so that you can mark it even if you can't see it, but the adaptation may not be particularly practical for you, may not work very well. And imagine that no one's asked you before the election what format might be more effective. This is Ontario in 1999. The Ontarians with Disabilities Act Committee wants 1.5 million Ontarians who now have a disability, most who are, if not most, who are voters, to be able to fully participate in exercising the most fundamental right we have in a democracy, the right to vote, the right to fully participate in all aspects of a campaign, to learn the positions of the parties, and to make an informed choice. Put simply, people with disabilities in Ontario want a barrier-free election. We are here today to kick off a campaign to fight for that. We, at the same time, are kicking off a campaign not only to make sure that we can participate in the election, but to make sure our concerns are fully aired in the election. Disability is going to be a core issue in this election. This is the first time in Ontario history that this has been tried, and we will succeed. There are many issues of importance to people with disabilities in Ontario. I'm only going to speak about one. But voters with disabilities will be encouraged not only to tackle the barriers they face so they can fully participate in the campaign and the vote, but also to make sure that candidates respond to their concerns during the campaign so they can make an informed choice of who to vote for. We will be highlighting one particularly important issue, though it's not the only issue of significance and importance, to 1.5 million Ontarians with disabilities, and indeed to everyone else who cares about people with disabilities or who will likely have one in their life. And that is the question whether or not we're going to get a strong and effective Ontarians with Disabilities Act. You see, the barrier-free election I'm talking about is just one strong, important example of what an Ontarians with Disabilities Act is about. We people with disabilities face barriers wherever we go. We face barriers in public transit, trying to get access to accessible public transit every day. Not just on the day we try to get to the polling stations or to an all-candidates debate. We face barriers in getting access to government information in a format we can use every day, not just when we try to get information about an election or an election campaign or about a voters list. We need a strong new law to solve this problem. This is not the first time or the first election where we've asked for this. The first time we asked for this in comprehensive legislation was in the last election. Since then, many events have unfolded which will give voters with disabilities and all voters a very clear choice when they look at the records and the positions of the parties on this question. In the last election, the Progressive Conservative Party under Mike Harris promised to enact an Ontarians with Disabilities Act in its first term and to work together with our coalition to develop it. Here, on the eve of the next election, we have no act. All we have seen late last year was a 3-page, toothless, do-nothing bill that would not require a single barrier to be removed anywhere, ever. From the Premier who promised to work with us, we've had 4 years of him refusing to even meet with us. Instead, he sends us to cabinet ministers who have no authority, no mandate, and no power. In contrast to that, we will go into this election with written, detailed election promises from both of the other two parties on this issue, from which voters can make a clear choice. The Liberal Party has promised that it would enact an Ontarians with Disabilities Act that is strong and effective, that complies with the 11 detailed principles that the disability community has put forward as necessary to get to a barrier-free society. The Liberal Party has promised to work with our coalition to develop that law. It has promised that that law would be enacted within the first 3 years of a Liberal mandate. The New Democratic Party has also promised in writing to pass a strong and effective Ontarians with Disabilities Act. It also has promised that its act would comply with the same 11 principles that the disability community has put forward as necessary to achieve a barrier-free Ontario. It has committed that a New Democratic Party's bill would be passed within the first 2 years of its mandate. Our coalition is nonpartisan. We will not endorse any party. We will put this information before voters. They will make their choice. So far, to kick off our campaign and available to you in letters that are present here today, we have written all three party leaders asking them to commit to a barrier-free campaign. We've also written to the Chief Elections Officer of Ontario. The letter, unfortunately, was not available here, but we can get it to you within the next couple of hours if you give us an email or fax number, asking for an assurance that within his jurisdiction, we will experience a barrier-free election. This barrier-free election that we seek is an excellent example of the importance of the Ontarians with Disabilities Act. Why is that? Well, first, if Premier Harris had kept his promise and had enacted a strong and effective Ontarians with Disabilities Act, we wouldn't have to fight now for a barrier-free election. Planning, mandatory action to achieve that would already be the law. Moreover, it's an excellent example because the kinds of steps that we need taken to ensure that we can fully participate in this election are not tough to do as long as you plan ahead. And that's what a strong and effective Ontarians with Disabilities Act is all about. Planning ahead. Picking polling stations that are the most accessible choices. Making sure campaign literature can be available on request, not only in print, but in alternative formats for people who can't read conventional print. Making sure that every campaign office is in an accessible location, has a TTY in it, and so on. Making sure all election advertisements, or I guess we could add pre-election election advertisements, are closed captioned. Just a few examples. But most importantly, not just turning to us now at the 11th hour and saying, oh my gosh, what should we do? But in fact, planning ahead and learning about these issues so the problem is solved or prevented before it ever happens. That's what a strong and effective Ontarians with Disabilities Act is all about. It's cheaper, it's more effective, and it helps a lot of people, not just in getting a barrier-free election, but in all aspects of society where we run into so many roadblocks. Finally, this barrier-free election that we seek is also an example of why the Harris government's approach to our needs is so fundamentally flawed. The Harris government's bill simply tells us that if you have a problem, Don't go to court because they can't do anything more for you. File a complaint with the Human Rights Commission. Now let's talk about how practical that would be for a voter with a disability. Let's say that you're a voter with a disability and it's election day and you want to go to a polling station, but it turns out that for some reason or other the station isn't accessible. Here's your solution. File a human rights complaint, wait to see if it's accepted, wait for it to be investigated, and some years from now, find out whether your rights were violated. Sure doesn't help you secure access to the right to vote now when you need it. That's just one little illustration, but a very good illustration of why the approach that the Harris government has offered us to our barriers is just not good enough. People with disabilities deserve better. Let me conclude by indicating that we have offered both the political parties and the chief elections officer some examples of steps they might take, and have encouraged them to reach out, to plan, and to work collectively to solve these problems now. The election hasn't been called. It would be unfair to 1.5 million voters with disabilities if it were called with these barriers not addressed adequately in advance. After all, none of them are new. None of them are surprising. None of them arose for the first time in 1999. Ask anyone with a disability. We know all about them, as will you if you experience a disability in your life. Thank you very much, and I'm quite happy to take questions. If I can ask you to just indicate who you are and which news organization you're from.
Ian Urquhart of the Toronto Star. Your letter to the Premier on March 28th, has there been a response? And have you met with Ms. Bassett since the legislature adjourned?
No and no. We have written to the Premier over and over again, seeking meetings with him to discuss this. We all know that the shots are being called from the Premier's office, but there has been no response, much less a specific or detailed answer. And no, we've had no contact from the Minister's office since the bill died and since she notified us of its death.
So when she offers to bring back, she's promising to bring back legislation when the House resumes, you don't know whether she plans to bring back exactly the same bill?
Well, she hasn't talked to us, but every indication we've heard from anyone she's talked to, publicly or less publicly, is that her intention is bringing back the exact same bill that was rejected and denounced not only by the opposition, but by everybody in the community who took the 30 seconds they needed to read its 3 empty pages. I should indicate on that front that we have, in the event that the government does try to bring that bill back, we have written the government several times indicating that there must be public hearings on that bill so that people can have a chance to say what they think and try to get it improved so it complies with the resolution that all parties, including the Premier's own party, approved last October 29, adopting our 11 principles. And indeed, in anticipation of that, on our encouragement, the clerk of the legislature has received letters from a range of people in the community who are indicating their desire to be put on the list for public hearings. So if that bill comes back and there's any thought on the government's part of having it debated and passed before an election is called, we have made a very strong and urgent request that there be full, exhaustive public hearings and a full opportunity for amendments to be proposed, which would which would bring that bill into compliance with the unanimous will of the legislature, including the Premier's own party.
Caroline Mallard from the Toronto Star. Can you tell me, the opposition parties seem to be promising action anywhere between 2 and 3 years, yet the Liberals, for example, say they'll stop government advertising that's partisan within 100 days. If the consultation is done and the 11 points are ready, are you looking for a firmer commitment to act sooner from the opposition?
We have not asked for a firmer commitment than the timelines they've proposed. We are pleased with the commitments they have made. Any voter is going to look at the promise of any politician with a certain amount of healthy skepticism, of course. After the last 4 years of dealing with the Premier Harris's promise, however, we believe that any politician that makes a promise to this particular community in writing sure knows that when they write us a letter during an election campaign, we remember it, we circulate it, and we make sure everybody knows about it, and we hope and trust that the party leaders that have made commitments did so very mindful of that fact. While one could always want the legislation prepared more quickly, and there will be some in the disability community who undoubtedly will want it prepared more quickly, it must be recognized that what the government, after its consultation, has done is produced a bill that does absolutely nothing. It's very easy and quick to write a bill that does nothing. To sit down and do the work necessary to provide a bill that is fair, that is comprehensive, and that is thorough is going to take more time, and it would be reasonable to expect that it will take some time, and that is why the commitments that have been made, while it's up to the voters to assess, are certainly ones which we have not urged to have accelerated further.
Rick Mackey from the Globe, David. You keep citing this figure, 1.5 million Ontarians with disabilities. How do you arrive at that figure?
I arrive at that figure because it's well recognized that the population of people with disabilities is at least 15%. That comes from federal data. If you go to the Ontario government's Citizenship Ministry website, they echo that figure, and we simply multiply 15% times the population of Ontario, and probably are being cautious in our use of those numbers. We also expect those numbers to increase over the next while because of the aging population and because age is a major cause of disability. That figure, by the way, has been used for policy purposes not only by major reputable players in the social policy field and in government and in the disability community itself.
Sorry, Caroline Mallard from the Star again. Just to clarify, 1.5 million Ontarians is not necessarily over 18 who can vote. Though.
Of course. No, that's what I said was that that's the number of people with disabilities there are. But if you add to that the fact that a major cause of disability is aging, and therefore disproportionately they will be older. For example, if I recall correctly, and you can check this out later, but I think that a very substantial proportion, if not at least 50% of people with vision impairments are over the age of either 50 or 65. I'm not sure which, but so that it works that way. But remember, we're not just talking about people who have a disability today. This is not a sector of society we're talking about. We're talking about everybody. Everybody either has a disability now or knows someone near and dear to them, parent, family member, child, spouse, who has a disability now or will have one sometime in their life. That's just natural.
Ian Urquhart again. Do you plan a protest at the Premier's events during the election campaign? And if so, can you elaborate?
We are now preparing our province-wide strategy. Today kicks off our activities by sharing with you both of the two core messages. We want a barrier-free election, and we want voters to know about and to take into account the sharp division in the positions of the various parties on the important issue of strong and effective legislation to achieve a barrier-free society. We're going to be, in the next few days, releasing a series of materials to our membership and using one of our favorite tools, the internet, as well as conventional mail and other means. We're going to be trying to get to as many people as possible to both let people know about these issues and to get them active, taking steps right across the province at the grassroots. And frankly, we haven't ruled out anything.
Al Vincent from CFRB. Caroline asked this question, and just to put it another way, you say you've been burned by Harris. What's to say that other political promises and other parties might not be broken, and we not be burned again, thinking of the fact that we have no public auto insurance in Ontario, which was a key promise in one election. We have the Liberals did not stop free trade, which is what Peterson stumped about, going way back in history. This is the way the games seem to be played.
Well, what assurance does anyone have when they vote? Do they have an ironclad assurance? No one does. However, the best you can do is to make it as hard as possible or impossible for them to break their promises. And we are going to look to strategies to do that. We've asked for commitments that aren't mealy-mouthed but are detailed, and from the two parties that have written us, the Liberals and the NDP, we must fairly state their commitments are absolutely clear and detailed. In fact, if you compare them to commitments that parties make in other venues, it's rare that that I have ever seen a party leader from any party that will detail the core principles that legislation will involve as much as they have for us. We have a clear yardstick to measure the legislation against. Secondly, we've got to make this issue a core election issue. And it will be because it cuts across the issues that you folks are already reporting on. I did a provincial call-in show on a TV station a couple of days ago on this issue. And what were the issues that people called about? Barriers in education, barriers in health care, barriers in access to jobs, barriers in access to child care. Those are among the core issues that we've already heard recognized as being core issues in this campaign. We're part of that. The other way that we have to make it effective is that we are going to be trying to approach as many candidates and as many all-candidates events as possible so that we don't just get commitments from the leaders, but on the ground floor from the candidates. And I will tell you that candidates are starting to call us, even in advance of this, because they see that this is going to resonate. All of that together, the visibility of the issue, the broad impact of the issue, and the clarity of the commitments will make it such that a betrayal of a promise to us will resound. Certainly the betrayal of the promise to us to date by Premier Harris has resonated. I mean, one can only look at the TV commercial that was on over the past couple of days, where we were told that the Premier did what he said he would do. As far as people with disabilities are concerned at this point, no, he didn't. Other questions? No other questions? Okay, we've got the materials that are available to you include the letters to the three party leaders. You've got the letters that we received from Mr. McGuinty and from Mr. Hampton. You've got our most recent letter to the Premier. If you need a copy of the letter to the elections officer, chief elections officer, we're happy to provide it. Any further information, you know where to find us. Thank you very much.